Yes. Welcome. I'm Rod Wallace, and this is the Zero Noize Podcast. Welcome back. This is where we engage in progressive discussions about music, life, and everything in between with our guests. This podcast is brought to you by Grove Studios, the 24/7 artist and production workspace. Whether rehearsing for your next show, producing a new song, doing a podcast, or shooting a video, Grove Studios is set up for the independent creator. And right now, Grove is offering monthly subscriptions, so you can learn more at grovestudios.space. This podcast is produced by Project Plugin, Mindstate Marketing, and shared with all streaming platforms through Captivate. I also want to take a special shout out to Leon Speakers. They create high-end audio solutions for your home, and it is very nice. It is awesome. You can visit them at leonspeakers.com. As always, I am also the co-founder of the Amplify Fellowship. And the Amplify Fellowship is where we provide local musicians with the ability to create new projects in exchange for community service or community organizations, to service to community organizations, And you can visit us at amplify-fellowship.com. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe wherever you are hearing or seeing the podcast. So if you don't know, I am Rod Wallace, and my life's work is to lift music and hip hop as both a historical subtext and the product of American culture, a medium of liberation, and the soundtrack for the search for Black freedom collectively and individually. The hip hop album is a primary source of critical discourse about life in America by those who create it. Therefore, we will not only discuss albums, not only of hip hop, but all kinds of albums that are commonly regarded as classics or close to classics. But I want to know about the music that changed the way our guests thought. Along the way, we will explore how music speaks to who we are and who we desire to be. Art is not valuable if it does not challenge, if it does not ask, and if it does not respond. We acknowledge that music decorates time as art decorates space. I ask dope people to come and visit with me. We talk about who they are, who they've been, and what they do. I ask them to be ready to discuss an album that played a role in them becoming them. You will not hear the music we will discuss for many reasons, but you will never hear it the same afterwards. Therefore, this is a music podcast, but it is a people's podcast. And today, the person is Dr. Nicole Carter. Welcome, Dr. Carter.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And the album is A Seat at the Table, starring Solange Knowles. And we'll get into that very shortly. Again, I'm just really thankful that you're here, Dr. Carter. And I'm anxious to kind of get your perspective on a number of things.
Okay.
Sounds good. Okay. So I encountered Dr. Carter when I was beginning to consider ideas for my dissertation. Actually, for those of you who don't know, I am in a doctoral program, and it's based around the use of hip hop as a pedagogical tool. It's based around how music can be utilized in classrooms, in schools, to be able to develop and build school culture, as well as to teach multiple competencies involving math and science, collaboration, and critical thinking. So my chair brought up the fact that he had a student who had created a very, very interesting dissertation that also involved art, similar to what I'm planning for, and involved performance. So he directed me to Dr. Carter, and I'm very excited to have her here. So Dr. Carter, can I first ask you, who is Nicole Carter?
Let's see. The first thing I would say as a response is a Black woman from Detroit, Michigan, West Side, who is always in search of something greater, always exploring, seeking knowledge, an educator to many, a listener, a sister, a daughter. Yeah.
So let's
an advocate. Forgot that one. But.
Absolutely. And currently, Dr. Carter is the director of the Wright State University Women's Center. She is also faculty in the Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies program. as well as African and African American studies. Her foci include the construction of knowledge by Black women, ancestral healing narratives and practices of women of color, the intersectional experiences of women in university settings, persistence and retention of women in higher education, and the creation of counter spaces for women, students of color, and women students in STEM medicine. She curates and facilitates trainings and workshops on topics ranging from racial equity, gender equity, intersectionality, and social justice locally, regionally, and nationally. That's a lot, Dr. Carter. How are you? So people in higher ed, what I've come to learn, and we will take a step back and kind of go back to Detroit and all of that, but people in higher ed tend to wear a lot of hats. How are you, like, what have you found to be key in you being able to manage all of these different things that you're doing?
So I often talk to people about one, like recognizing that this idea of balance doesn't exist. And so I feel like, and it might sound strange, but this work-life balance is a thing that I don't like really jive with, because like everything that I do as a form of quote unquote work is my life. Like it's part of my life. It is strengthening my life, and it's strengthening the life of others. And so it is they're deeply connected together. So I also have been in a place where like I was extremely stagnant, and not to get ahead of questions and like the past conversations, but extremely mentally just like in a bad place mentally. And I recognized I wasn't doing things that spoke to me and fulfilled my passion. And where some people might have like just this one thing that they do that's like, oh, like this is my life and it's my life's work and it's all I need. I am not that person. So I have my hands in a lot of pots. Like
Absolutely.
I do a lot of things. So, and I'm actually extremely content, more so than I've ever been. So
So I mean, in addition to all the things that I just talked about, you also run a business.
Mm-hmm.
You also, obviously, you have family and you have friends and you have other social obligations as well.
Yes.
And from what I hear you saying, that you're in a blessed position, however, to be able to be doing things that align with your purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And that is absolutely a gift. And I feel the same. I feel that even like we just talked about, even me doing this podcast aligns with my purpose, and gives me the chance to be able to connect my love of music and media and technology, along with being able to develop and build relationships with people. So it's refreshing to hear that. Now let's talk about the West Side.
Okay.
What does being from the, and we'll be talking a lot about, intersectionality and things of that nature today too. What does, one of the exercises we had recently in class was to kind of define all the things that determine your lens. I'm Black, I'm a man, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a, educator, I'm hip hop focused, so on and so forth. What does, when you tell a person that you're from the West Side of Detroit, what does that mean to you?
So I always think of this line, like the West Side is the best side. Like I always think of that.
That's like Cube, actually, right?
Yeah.
Right.
But also, I know that there are like so many connotations that go along with like at least like particularly in Detroit and other places as well. But like if you're from the West Side or from the East Side, like people like to guess certain things about you. And I don't know, like I feel like while some people might say certain things about like the city. Like I just have like this like deeply complex narrative associated with it and experience associated with it. And so when I think of the West Side, I think of specifically just the fact that in terms of financial things or socioeconomic status, it was a blend, you know, like in terms of like the community, it was blended. There were obviously poor folks throughout the city and sections of the neighborhood that existed around me. And then you had working class, and then you had middle class. And then if you drove down Southfield Freeway, you know, there was like upper middle class communities. And so for me, it meant a blended kind of upbringing, kind of in terms of, well, financially anyway, but also the fact that like when you growing up in Detroit in the 80s and 90s meant that you were growing up at a time where it was the majority of the people, one, were in the neighborhoods. They weren't downtown. They weren't in Midtown or, you know, those other areas. But also that majority was Black. And so that was important for my upbringing. But then because I grew up on the West Side and I grew up really close to Dearborn, literally if I walked across the street or walked across West Warren, that was Dearborn. So I was also introduced to, you know, like ethnic diversity in a way that I feel like if you grew up in other areas of Detroit, just that wasn't the case. And so for me, that has just shaped everything, like everything about me. Like I just, I'm appreciative. Also, like down the street, there was Gigi's, like a gay club. So it's like all of these different things have like, there is no, that is part of that intersectional identity, the social locations. Place is a huge component of who I am.
Absolutely.
And so although I don't stay there anymore, it definitely informs the things that I do and how I show up.
How did you begin to become curious about the things that you ended up choosing to study? Because a lot of times that happens before there's a seed that's planted before you even go to college.
Okay. So, one, my dad was a school teacher. And I hesitated a second because he went back to coach track. So he's coaching track again. Anyway, but he worked for Detroit Public Schools for 42 years. And growing up in that household meant that I had access to things in terms of like educational resources that I feel, and I know for a fact that a lot of the people I grew up with did not have. Things that I like hold true and hold close to me today, like even things like bookshelves, like having like this, like these options of things. But those bookshelves that my father had were lined with books on Black folks, written by Black folks. One of the first books he had me read was Unbought and Unbossed by Shirley Chisholm. And then there were just like, the autobiography of Malcolm X. He also like did art, like he drew pictures and stuff. And so one of the ones that he frequently drew was Malcolm X. And so we had like these drawings in the basement. And we had a chalkboard for some reason. I don't know why we had a chalkboard in the basement. But anyway, we had a chalkboard, like it was embedded in the wall. So like a chalkboard in the basement, he drew Malcolm X on that. And Malcolm X was everywhere throughout the house. And so we had conversations about it. I recall him kind of having these like personal, like monologues with the news when like Reagan, like would come on and he would like be mad and like, and so like all of these informs like the beginning of the things that I was interested in learning. But for the most part, I learned about Blackness and what that meant. And I would always have like this like thing in the back of my mind, like trying to, like, I wonder why we don't ever talk about like being a girl, like, but I mean, my dad was also, when I was coming up, like, he now is a veteran. He's a veteran. He was very like regimented in terms of like rules and, like behavior, what you do when you wake up, like fixing the bed, like these different. And I actually tried my darnest to like just, I did everything that he didn't want me to do. So, and actually, I thought you were going to ask about schooling in Detroit.
Yeah, sure.
Because I actually didn't go to school. Like, I went to school in Detroit, but I went to private school my entire life.
Wow.
So pre-K to actually college, I even went to a private liberal arts college. So,
okay.
So like so even there, I was introduced though to information that normally you wouldn't be introduced to. I feel like it wasn't like this standardized curriculum. So I had, and it wasn't all the time, but I had teachers who were like very adamant about talking about the experiences of Black folks. But again, rarely was it about Black women or Black girls. And so that was something that always lingered.
As a curiosity, as a deeper curiosity.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't being fulfilled. Okay.
Yeah.
So that drove a lot of what you did in undergrad then. And so tell me about, was there a seminal work or a experience that really turned that on for you and kind of made you recognize all of those other things that occurred or those other things that were missing, and it kind of turned you in that direction?
So I wouldn't say it was one thing. I feel like it was a series of things that progressively led to kind of like an awakening. So the first thing was when I got ready to go to college. And I feel like many Black parents have this talk with their children when they say like the whole spiel, like, so you need to know you're gonna have to work harder or like 10 times harder because you're X, Y, and Z. And so instead of just saying like I was young and Black, my dad said, because I was at that time, he said I was a young Black female, even though like now I really cannot stand that term when referencing a young woman or woman, period. But I knew what he meant. Well, I knew I had an idea, but we just had a conversation about like what it would mean to be going to college as this young Black woman and the work that it would necessitate. And so that was like the one thing. And then after that, I would say my experiences on the campus that I went to. First, I went to a large public campus, so public 4-year institution. And my experiences, particularly with men, like I feel like would set up like this path to like explore options for something greater, something more freeing, if you will, like relationships not based on like these roles and or regimented roles, like gender-based roles, things like that, and or intimidation and violence and control. And so, but I didn't know it then, right? Like, so I'm just going through life. So there's that. And then I left, I actually transferred to Marygrove College. And
shout out to Marygrove. I got my master's there.
Yeah, see, and my dad got his master's there, which is why I transferred there. But so I went there, and even then I like went through just some trauma in my life, and not knowing then what I know now, but like it would, you know, like just kind of create this life, like in this, I guess, like need to advocate for myself and others. So, but then when I was at Marygrove, I went and got a master's from Marygrove as well. Actually, in English. And my last class was a class on experiential women's literature.
Okay.
And in it, we read work by Audre Lorde and Bell Hooks. And I was just like, what? Like, I had never taken any feminism or women's studies course ever before that point. And I'm like, so it took the last class for me to like realize that these things exist. And I mean, but that last class changed my life. And that moment really, like, I remember having a conversation with one of my professors, and she was like, so there's a master's program at Eastern Michigan. It's one of the only ones in Michigan in women and gender studies. And I think you would get in. So she wrote, you know, like she helped me, got in, and the rest is history. But like, right. Yeah, I truly believe, so even like right now, I've been trying to work, I'm so busy, but I've been trying to work on a memoir, but the memoir is based on the lessons I learned from Black feminist theorists. So it's like pieces of their work, and then I talk about the lessons, basically, based upon their writing.
Absolutely. Are there other kind of broad misconceptions that you see even a lot of academics subscribe to, that you just directly disagree with, that are commonly held as like canon when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion work? This microscope into generational trauma and racism. Are there other things that you encounter that are frequently done or said that you disagree with?
Yeah, a lot. Like everything. I was just playing.
Speak on it.
There's so much. So the biggest one is thinking that a task force or some special committee or something like that is actually going to and this is me, truly create change. So I have these conversations with people often, and they're people who like are usually in my circle though, because other people don't like to hear it. However, the reality is that, like, so for example, if you're not at a HBCU, and even HBCUs have issues, but if you're not at an HBCU, these spaces, even corporations, all these different organizations and things like that, were not created for you to exist within, to learn within, to navigate. So they were created with using white supremacy as a framework.
Right.
So organize them to create policy and practices that keep the organization going and flowing. So therefore, your task force is not going to create change within that culture and structure. You got to redo the whole structure. And we're not ready for that conversation at all. Even HBCUs, though, I said that because it's true. Like, so Oh, cool. Yeah, you got an HBCU, but are you supporting all of the students who attend your institution and all of the staff and faculty who work at your institution across the social identities? That is not the case. And so I don't know. So like so that's one of the things that I often think about, actually.
Indeed.
Because I'm asked to be on so many different committees related to diversity, inclusion, equity, social justice, all of these things. And that is the reality. Like, if you're not willing to talk about the framework, and I have this sticky note in front of me on my desk, so that I can remember every day, disrupt or dismantle. Which one are you doing?
There's so many situations where I'm a part of those conversations, and I'm frequently one of the only African-American people that are there. And I'm usually the only Black man that's there. And there's always questions about, well, why can't we get more Black men or Black women to come to the table? And my response typically is, you have to be very clear about what your intent is, because we've all heard this before. And my positionality amongst this group is to redirect you towards the word that you use, dismantling. I've seen it happen. I've seen new tools built. We're going to do an assessment. We're going to do, we're going to start to have an initiative where there are events, and it's deeper than all of that. It's structural. So I absolutely agree with you. I'm really curious about how that mentality affected you as you moved into your doc program.
So I didn't even begin thinking about that until the doctoral program.
Okay.
And it wasn't until the end of the doctoral program.
So the end being the end of coursework, the end being when you started at the dissertation phase, what?
So the comp phase, so the examination phase, because that's when it's like you're being required to research all of these things that connect to your focus area, right? And so I started to do just that. I started to I started to just read and listen and like watch and and I think we've talked previously about like there was a time where I actually even considered like stepping back and like not finishing, because I believed, and I still do in some way, shape, or form, like in some ways,
speak on
that like this group of white folks convening to decide for you, the majority of white folks, because it depends on your committee, but for the most part, group of white folks convening to decide if your work is worthy or not to call you doctor is like basically what I'm writing against. Like, it's what I'm trying to prevent from happening. It's what I'm trying to raise awareness about like that. So there are forms of education that take place outside of these spaces. And also those who could never afford or I don't know, even want to step foot on college campuses are still deserving to be in those spaces. So like, I don't know, like that was a major thing. And that's when I started. So it actually happens kind of simultaneously, thinking like I was angry about the process. I was angry about like this committee being able to have this much power over what they think I know. And reading, I actually think it started before the comps. It had to, because we were reading about community education and and different things like that. And so I started doing all this research on schooling, really. So like the SNCC, the Civil Rights Organization,
Right.
And how their process of educating youth and college students before they would actually go and do protests and sit-ins and all these different things. They would go through a process of education in homes and in church basements and all of these different things. And so I was like extremely interested in education in between the spaces, like
Okay.
so that took place, like the wisdom shared and education shared,
Right.
that didn't have a formal wall, you know.
I'm so happy to hear you say that, because a lot of the discussion about, or from my cohort, involves how not necessarily we democratize the process, but we liberate the process. One of our frustrations in our program is there's the development, there needs to be the development of an understanding of operating in a white supremacist based society. That is there. There's also another tier that says these are the functions and abilities that a PhD person, a person with a PhD, must exhibit in order to be a PhD. There's that school of thought, whether you agree with it or not. And then for us, we've sought how to, we kind of have understood the first two. We kind of are already there. And truth be told, we stepped to the process understanding it. We have gained some additional information. We have done some additional research, obviously. And we've also been able to kind of look deeper into our own interests through that lens in a much more rich way. Mm-hmm. However, what we push the program to do is to teach and prepare the people who pass out of that program to be able to navigate and make change in those systems. That is what we are there for. And that's why we constantly give pushback, like okay, we understand that. We understand that there are also people who are coming to the table who do not have the comprehension or experience to know what we know. Because I was in urban schools for 20 years. So I'm fully aware of the inequity, and I'm learning about the why. I mean, I know the why, but I need to know, how do I navigate it and break it apart? Mm-hmm. And so a lot of that is on you. A lot of that still is on you. And there's a lot of resources that's involved in getting a PhD. There's a lot of time that's involved. You know, I'm watching my kids grow up. You know, my kids have picked up 3 years on me, you know, in the time that I've been in this program, because I'm at comps at the end of summer. So I fully and 100% understand. And I think part of, from what I'm being told, the manner in which you did your dissertation was a freeing experience for you personally, but also it illustrated to the academics who may have been around you that let's look at how we can do this in a different way. So can you talk just a little bit about what you did for your dissertation and why it was such an eye-opening, I don't want to say an eye-opening experience, but how it affected you so broadly after you completed it?
So my dissertation was, well, I should say it is, because it's a living document.
It is. It absolutely is.
So it is on. So I wouldn't, again, use the term female anymore, but at that time, I didn't think of that way. So like, it was on basically the epistemological practices of Black women who are still performers and artists in Detroit. So it was extremely special to me in that it was a completely, for me, innovative project I know for a fact for the program, nobody had done anything like that before. Not, and partially because I was in the second cohort. So,
Right.
but also when you look up the type of writing that exists in some of the chapters, which was basically writing to put the interview, like the data in conversation with each other thematically. There's only one person who has theorized about that type of writing, and they weren't in education. They weren't they right. So and so I think it was. I don't think I know that it was special to me because it really just changed my life in terms of like my relationship to one, the city of Detroit, my relationship to the written word, my relationship to art as writing and writing through as art. And so and then it meant that I became part of a community of women who, like, if you would have asked me like a year prior, I would have never like been, you know, in the Cass Corridor area at like spoken word events, because like even though people might think that I'm like an extrovert, I'm not. I'm an introvert, and like I like music and I like art, but I'm just like kind of to myself. But it just pushed the boundaries of everything about me, my thinking, who I thought I was. And so I am who I am because I think because of that process. So like partially because of that process. But yeah. So, and I'm friends with all of those people still today. And I follow them and I see, you know, the work that they're doing and how they have either progressed or like they're continuing that same work. So,
So let's talk real briefly about Nicole, the budding artist. Okay. In your dissertation, there's one segment that says, I want answers. I want to know why I always feel undone. Who created these identities that never fit? Seriously, who created this shit? To think I was once so naive, blinded by the American dream. I should have known I wasn't meant to survive. My mother never made it to 50. I was 7, motherless, and expected to be happy. Called white girl because my hair wasn't nappy and my skin was too pale to fit into these boxes. I used my fist to beat blackness into my skin, black like my daddy, black and beautiful like the girls in my class, not realizing my own beauty until many years later. My own aunt couldn't bear to look at me. A small child, and she couldn't bear to look at me. Maybe she was confused too, pretending to be an ethnicity she could never live up to. I chalk it up to anger or self-hate. And then there's my attempt to navigate an academy, secondary and beyond, whose doors didn't make room for the complexities of my black womanhood. In Detroit, not just a city, but a way of life, teaching girls like me that educational attainment was kind of trite. Friends constantly reminded me that hood mentalities are embedded deep in the most articulate of women. You know the saying, you can take the girl out of the hood, but you can't take the hood out the girl. And how am I supposed to choose when I am both all of the above and none of these things at all? So it's like what I took away from that is there's obviously, you just basically talked about everything that we've talked about today.
yes.
And there's a double consciousness that exists.
I would say like
triple, quadruple consciousness.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I'm just taken aback by how, you know, I kind of obsessed over this process when I got involved in it. And to be able to read something like this in somebody's dissertation that is so personal and so indicting is really motivational to me. And that's one of the reasons that, I'm happy that I've been able to connect with you. After hearing this was 2016 or 15?
15. 15.
2015. Now we're 6 years later. And now
time flies.
yes, right. Now this is 6 years later. And at the time of the pressing of this podcast, and you're listening to that. I don't know how often you go back and you read it or you listen to it, or because for me, I kind of leave things. I'm real serious about kind of leaving things where they were. How does it make you feel to kind of hear that and hear your thoughts about yourself during that time, kind of juxtaposed with where you are now, where you are empowered, like you said, to help girls and help women to break through that trauma?
I'm still that person. I'm
Yeah.
still that same person. It was kind of emotional to hear it. I was thinking, like, is he about to read this whole thing?
No, I wasn't gonna read the whole thing.
So it was interesting because I just submitted, well, it was like a couple of months ago, I submitted a piece to be published, but it was actually like an essay. But I feel like the essay was the same thing. It was just not in poetic form. And so it's just very interesting. I remember reading that when I first got to campus where I am now for a poetry slam that they had. And I don't know, like, and I read it for the defense as well during the defense. And I mean, it's still me. Like, I am still that person navigating this world. I do feel like I am more empowered than perhaps I was when writing it. But yeah, I still have the aunt. Well, she just passed in 2019, but still the aunt who, like, she passed and I never spoke to her. Like, I didn't even know she was still alive until in December, this past December. I found out she died. So still the same thing. I feel I'm in these many like all of these worlds I am part of. I don't see them though. I think then I saw them as like kind of limiting. But now it's like they're not. Like they just are. Like, I am part of them. They inform who I am. I am from Detroit, and I am from a very working class area of Detroit, raised by a single father. I also went to private school, so I had that experience. I also am now considered upper middle class, that experience. But I'm also living with, I didn't have then, like disability, multiple disabilities. I have two now, officially. But who's counting? Anyway, but, like, so life changes, but I'm still that person. Detroit is still within me. I'm still, I'm still wondering why these things happen to people, why, but I am more like, I would say that I am in love with myself more than I ever was before. And it is because of the aches and the pains and the fact that I'm thriving, not just surviving. I'm thriving through it. So I don't know. Like, I love that piece though. Like, and if I can be honest, I wasn't a writer of any poetic anything before that point. I just did paintings. That's all I did. So the fact that, you read that made me kind of emotional. Like, wow, you read it.
but here's what's trippy about me reading that is that it is literally a perfect segue to talk about this album. Because just think about what this album means and what this album is about and what you said when you talked about not realizing my own beauty until many years later. when you talked about to think I was once so naive. And I think that this is what this album is about. Is okay, so Solange Knowles, the seat at the table, just to kind of, set the table. I killed my notes, but this came out on September 30th, 2016. Where were you and what were you doing?
So I don't know exactly where I was, but given that it was September 30th, that means that I was probably teaching somewhere. I was teaching at Wright State, obviously. But I do remember I was teaching a Black feminism course. So we used this album to discuss particularly self-care. And then we talked about self-care and advocating for self. Now I would call it self-determination and care, but
self-actualization too.
But determination particularly.
Okay.
Because of some of the songs on the album that I didn't necessarily focus on at that time. Mm-hmm. But because of where I was in life, and if you want me to get real, like where I was in life, I was going through. So actually, September 30th, 2016. Yes, I actually decided to separate from my then husband. So there was that. Okay. Also, I just got diagnosed with Crohn's in March that year. So like earlier. Mm-hmm. And so I was in and out of the hospital. Mm-hmm. I had just started a women of color mentorship group at the school. And so all of these things, like I was really focused on caring for self, but also teaching other women who look like me, young women who look like me, the importance of just stopping, slowing down, saying no, right? And
getting off of autopilot, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Because I was, but things happen. The term I would use for that now is divine disruption, but like things happen to make you wake up.
Absolutely. Yeah. So one thing I like to do is I like to talk about the cover of these projects. Okay. They mean a lot intentionally, but they also mean a lot unintentionally. Mm-hmm. And when they can be looked at as an independent piece of art, especially sometimes connected to the character of the music, because for me, I don't talk through music from the perspective of, I like this and I don't like that. I don't really look at it that way. I look at it from a more critical perspective. Like, what was the intent? And was the person who created it, did they connect with their intent? And truth be told, sometimes we don't really know. But when you look at this picture, and we know the character of Solange, first of all, this picture was chosen by Solange, and it was not purposeful. She was actually preparing for a photo shoot for her cover and other artwork. And she looked at herself, I believe she looked at herself in the mirror, and she said, let's just do the shoot right now. And for me, it's about transition. What are the things in her hair for, Nicole? Do you know what they are? I know you know what they are.
Those are those hair clips,
Right.
Holding the piece because you're doing this other piece.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So this is a cultural element of African American women. Preparation of the hair. It's a cultural element for many women in the world. And this is her natural hair, I assume. And when you think about the character of Solange, I personally believe that when you look at the high school that is music, like with all these different characters walking around in the high school, Solange existed in the shadow of her sister. Her sister is literally larger than life to many. And Solange sought identity. And in some ways, based on what she said, she saw identity by being, first she tried to be similar, because at one point she was being considered for being a part of Destiny's Child, especially when they was going through members for a minute. Yeah, they was going through changes. And then she went the complete opposite way and was making music that was very, very different from what her sister was making. And it was like this project was her literally kind of coming into her own. So one of the things that I kind of took away from this cover is it was her preparing herself for where she was going. And whether that was purposeful or not, that's what this project ended up being. It was, most of it was written in a place called New Iberia, Louisiana, which is the where her family was from. I don't remember. I believe it was mom.
Yeah, mom.
Mom's family was from. And did you hear the story about the grandfather and all of that?
She tells it, and so a couple of the interviews that she did about the one in particular, I think it was with NPR actually, and she talks about the history of New Liberia and her family within that history.
Right. So there was something that was said about her grandfather being stuck in a mine and them giving up the rescue, and his family going back into the mine themselves without all of the equipment to get back in and everything to dig them out. And they found them and they pulled them out. And it caused a major racial conflict in the area. They ended up leaving and they moved to Galveston. And then eventually, obviously, they landed in Houston. And, the rest of the story is what it is. But she talked about how she wrote the majority of the album in that place because as a way to reclaim that place. And that's very interesting to me. Do you have family from down south?
So my grandmother was actually from Minden, Louisiana.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I probably have family down south, but like I can't tell you exactly where they stay because the majority of them moved to Detroit. So and my grandfather, so these are on my dad's side. My grandfather was born from Arkadelphia, Arkansas.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
So the Louisiana piece is also like, I think, a connection for me because I've always kind of been in search of like this history because I just personally don't feel like my family did a good job of like staying connected. But yeah.
Absolutely. And I'm kind of going through that now.
Yeah.
Even though my immediate family on my mom's side is in Flint. I don't always do the best job of staying connected with them. And I definitely need to do better. But you taught a class on this record.
Well, I taught like sections of a class, so not the entirety of the class, but
I do believe it has some very interesting things to say about femininity and identity and how she developed relationships with her own femininity and identity. Did it speak to you similarly?
No.
No? Okay.
No.
Okay.
So can we go back to the cover for a second?
Let's go back to the cover.
Okay. So I actually appreciate your interpretation of the cover. It's interesting. I didn't think of it that way.
Okay.
But also in 2016, when this album came out, Black women were doing this thing with their hair, which was wearing these clips outside, like not as part of a preparation, but as part of just like their hairstyle.
The presentation.
Yes. And so for me, that is what this was about. Like, it doesn't matter what you think or you're like about your ideals of a Blackness period, of how like respectability, politics, of how you believe Black folks and for the cover, Black women are supposed to show up. This is done. This is done. This is complete right here. And so, and yeah, like especially because of, so one, we have obviously the song Don't Touch My Hair, but
absolutely.
Yeah. So like to me, that's what I got from it. Because like if you go back and you look, even things like, and so this still happens now, but like house shoes and stuff like that, like wearing these things out. So they're like, even Black folks critique this, right? Like as this like, this is a mess. This is ghetto. This is ratchet. This is, all of these things. But it's like this, what if we looked at these things as like, this is this Black person taking control of this Black person's body that is their own, of their clothing, of the things that they, like I don't have to like show up in this particular way for you to respect me. You just respect me, like point blank, period. So I just think it was symbolic of like the styling, but like the things that were in style at that time.
Okay, that's interesting. That's definitely interesting. I'm curious about, she did interview her family for several hours. And then you had like Master P. She interviewed Master P, and he kind of talked through some thoughts about what was going on in the climate. I mean, this was, a climate where there was a bit of a mainstream spotlight, still to no avail to a large degree, on what was happening involving police and Black men. There was one that happened not even 10 days before. There was a large scale kind of issue, or a man was murdered 10 days before this album came out. I don't know specifically who it was, but it kind of came out in the midst of that. So it was very timely. And I think about when I read that, it made me think about ethnography. It made me think about being a stranger. That's something that we've been learning about in our program. Through your experience, what have you learned about being able to ask the right questions to people? Because I think the inverse may actually be true when it comes to not being so direct, giving people the flexibility. Do you recall any of that you learned in the program?
So my dissertation was autoethnographic.
Right.
On like, so I guess like, yeah, like I've like, so obviously me and like structure like doesn't really work very well. So like, like, so like I just, like asking questions, like, I don't know, like as it connects to the album and ethnography, I think. So you had asked that question about me thinking if it was connected to like her femininity or anything like that. And that's why I said no. Like I guess perhaps, but when I think of this album, I don't think about that. Like I think it is like an exploration of Black culture. Like it is like a telling, a retelling. It's about remembrance. And to me, it is like an example of what really many Black women do today. Like often are silenced when it comes to like being given the spotlight and movements. Mm-hmm. So like, for example, for a long time when people thought of Black Lives Matter as a movement, they didn't think of those 3 Black women. Particularly, they definitely didn't think of 3 queer Black women at all. Mm-hmm. So, but Black women have led movements, you know, like they have been at the forefront. And so what I see this album as being, and as it connects to ethnography, those questions, right, mm-hmm. are a means of telling the story of Black folks, particularly those living and existing in the South. But yeah.
So the stories, so the interviews and the interviews just basically grounded it and connected this story to history, mm-hmm. basically. Okay.
Yeah, but and then when I say, and you probably have like particular questions about particular songs, I don't know, but
no.
Like remember I mentioned that to me it was about self-determination. Mm-hmm. So that whole section on FUBU and Forest Bias, so the interlude, mm-hmm. Forest Bias with Master P,
right,
and then FUBU, the song. So I feel like each of these songs serve as like this framework for a new Black existence. Like, so like if we look specifically at FUBU and Forest Bias as the interview, like it's teaching us about like being economically liberated. Like these are some steps. So for example, Master P, when he talks about his family, particularly his brother, right? Like questioning, like, you ain't gonna take this money? You ain't gonna take this deal? And it's like, no, I'm worth more than that. Mm. So it's like there are lessons throughout this whole album about like existence. So yeah, maybe it can be about her femininity, but I just didn't see it.
I understand. I guess it was about empowerment. Mm-hmm. It was about empowerment and being able to remain in a feminine space through empowerment and still be empowering. Whereas a lot of music does not reflect the same degree of empowerment associated with femininity. That's what I saw.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess like, so that goes back to what I was saying about women leading these movements, but not mm-hmm. being given like recognition for it. And so I think this is like we see her like doing this work, and these are lessons through the experiences, or things being told through the experiences, and using the voice of this Black woman. Absolutely. So yeah.
Did you feel like, I always try to identify like a philosophical center of an album. I felt like Don't Touch My Hair is kind of like a philosophical center to a degree. Whereas I look at it as my interest is in completely breaking any framework that's in play that allows me or encourages me to be uncomfortable at your expense.
Also Mad. So I feel like Mad mm-hmm. and Don't Touch My Hair actually collectively do that.
Okay. Tell me about Mad. What did you think about it?
So first of all, that was the song I resonated with the most on the album.
Okay.
Primarily because, so in 2016, as you mentioned, all of these things were happening, right? Like all of these murders, all of the like and really racial unrest. So like we see all these protests happening across the country, all of these things happening, and Black folks were being called, like their anger was being minimized. The anger was being, like basically seen as trivial, seen as like why are you so angry? Like what what are you angry about? And really the same thing has happened to Black women, like period, right? Like the angry Black woman trope. And so usually we're told, even by other Black folks, to contain our anger. And so also around this time, we see other texts come out, theoretical texts, like Brittany Cooper's text on, what was it? Now I'm blanking on the name, but Eloquent Rage.
A Black feminist discovers her superpower.
Yeah.
Okay.
And but way before that, in the 70s, we have Audre Lorde, who writes The Uses of Anger. And so for me, this was central to really every other song on this album, because for me, anger is the means to which we create change and transformation happens. But we try to like put anger in a box and minimize it and suggest that it's not necessary. And I actually talk to my students all the time, like, you can be angry all day. It's like your anger is justified. And even if it wasn't, like, it's your anger. Like, you are angry about something, it matters. However, when you're done, what we gonna do? What we gonna do about it? Because if we don't use it for a greater good, like, nothing changes. So anger is the reason why all of these organizations were created. Anger is the reason why policies and practices are changed, because somebody is so angry that they demand different. And so I just feel like mad. And really, so Don't Touch My Hair, it's kind of like, I'm mad, so let me tell you why I'm mad. And so that's like Don't Touch My Hair, but that's also Cranes in the Sky.
Right.
Because like all this bullshit exists and it keeps happening, the Cranes, right? Like all this stuff exists, it keeps happening. Nobody's doing anything about it. So I'm angry. I'm angry because like, and I mean, the reality is like, this the touching of hair happens. It's like a real thing, but it's also symbolic.
Absolutely.
Like, hair is the person. Like, this is an extension of all of me. And so it's like all of these things. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, it's like,
I do.
It's like mad is the center.
Yes, I do. I can receive that.
Yeah. So
I just felt like Don't Touch My Hair was the action that you speak of. Like, mad was mad. This is how you feel, but this is where, when I go back to talking about that empowerment piece, me empowering myself is for me to say, don't touch my hair.
Yeah.
That's why I felt like it was the center as opposed to mad.
But you empowering yourself, and I think I'm from a perspective, like my own perspective as a Black woman who has often like had that anger silenced or attempted to have it silenced by white folks, by other Black folks. Yeah. Like,
right.
Like, or to even have people say when you're angry, you're just being crazy. Like, it's not that deep. Right. Like, and so for one, there to be an entire song dedicated to like this reality to me, it speaks volumes. So it's like, it's okay to be angry. It's okay to be mad. And it's so okay that I'm about to put it as one individual song on this album. And then I'm about to do an interlude with my daddy where he tell you he mad too. So like, so I don't know. It's just, I feel like mad is an action that matters as well. Like it is an affirmative thing. Like, I am mad. And it's okay that I'm mad. I have a right to be mad. And I'm telling you why I'm mad.
I receive
I'm
that.
also telling you, don't touch my hair. Like, ever. So
because I'm mad.
Yes.
It's not a separation.
Not just because I'm mad though, but yeah. Like, don't touch, I mean, I don't know. Like, it's, I don't know. And then I'm trying to look up some of the lyrics from there, because it's like this piece that I like a few weeks ago. I actually was listening to it and I kept playing it over and over again. This section, I kept like going back. And
find that.
So it says,
You find it?
No, I can't remember. I'm trying.
The magic of editing.
Yeah, you can edit that out.
Oh, it's no problem. This is it, mad?
Yeah.
Hold up.
So it's actually Lil Wayne's lyrics, but it's like, so in his, he said, because doing it all ain't enough, because everyone all in my cup, because such and such still owe me bucks, so I got the right to get bucks, but I try not to let it build up. I'm too high, I'm too better, too much, so let it go, let it go, let it go. And then I just like, so that part one, that was like important to me, because just like Black women, Black men have the same thing, right? Like, it's like this threat to demonstrate anger. Like, it's a threat to, and I think here, like, he's trying to like remind himself of like how powerful he actually is in the face of all of the things that are happening. But honestly, the intro to it is the part that I a couple of weeks ago kept playing over and over again, because I always hear this, particularly in a organization I'm in, when they say count it all joy, right? Like, it's like, but what about the the positive things that have happened, and like, like these, and like, despite those things, and even here, you got the right to be mad.
You got the right to be mad.
Yeah.
Lil Wayne said, I got a lot to be mad about.
Yeah.
Got a lot to be man about.
Yes.
Be a man about. Got a lot to Papa Zan about.
So here,
go for it.
Here, and that's so powerful, because one,
yes.
Like, come on. Like, when do we hear Black men talk about, like, so you pop in the Zan, that means to me, you're telling me that there's also like a concern for mental health, something we never talk about.
Right.
But he's also affirming like these things are all things, like rightful solutions to the shit that's going on in this world, to even like stereotypical notions of manhood, like this idea of how you want me to show up in this world.
Got a lot to be a man about.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Yes.
this song is powerful to me. Like, it's just, but also, yeah, it just is. I don't know. And maybe it's just where I am, like, currently in my life.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
So what does, so count it all joy. What gives you joy at this point?
What gives me joy?
Yeah.
So I'm at peace, and I haven't been ever until this point, probably like 2 months ago. And I'll just be honest about it. So I am busy as heck, but it is all because I am doing things that I love to do. I'm reading, I'm talking to people, having conversations about things I actually want to have conversations about. I'm at the table, I'm creating tables, you know, and I don't know, like I feel like I just have the ability to do so much. And I also have recognized my power, like power in, so I'm big on like manifesting. And so I just recognize like the fact that if I say I'm going to do something, I can actually do it. Like if it seems like the resources don't exist at this moment, I know how to make that happen. And I'm not just talking about financial, but I'm also talking about like, again, knowledge and skill and, you know, like navigating different things. And so there was a point in my life where I did not recognize that power. Also finally recognizing that, going back to what we open with, like doing all of these things. So I think we're taught that we have to do this one thing in life, and that should be like your goal. And, you know, like, but no, like that's not it. That's not it at all. So
we call it dying empty. You want to die empty. You don't want to die with anything left in the tank.
No, like absolutely. But I am, if there will be things in the tank, because you asked me about joy, and joy is in the tank. Joy. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, but I'm not, I refuse to be bored ever again. And I refuse to like have other people control my life ever again. So.
Amen. We would be remiss not to talk about cranes in the sky. I know that there is not a think piece that exists that doesn't speak to cranes in the sky. Tell me about that song and how you felt about that.
So, Cranes in the Sky. So can we talk about the backstory? So, you know, I don't know if you know this, but she wrote this, I think it was like almost 8 years prior to this album.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw that.
And so now in thinking about it now, she talked about leaving, right? Like this situation, like this home, but also a relationship.
With her
that
child's father,
really,
right?
Yeah.
With her child's father.
Yeah, and she had been with him since high school, like since you know, and so, and thinking about that now, I don't know. This piece is powerful for me. Like, so mad is powerful because like I'm angry often and it justifies my anger. But Cranes in the Sky is also because in my life, I have been the person that she talks about in this piece, like doing all of these things as a means to not deal with the anger and not deal with the pain and not deal with the trauma that was experienced. Tried to stay and stick it out because it was comfortable, right? But then also all the stuff she talked about. Slept it away, sexed it away, read it away, all these things. drank it away. And so for me, I don't think it's just me who has felt that. I don't think it's just her. I feel like we all do things to avoid the truth and vulnerability. And
Absolutely.
yeah, like one of the things I think about often is like this concept of toxic positivity, like acting for other people, like the world is just oh, everything's perfect and I'm so happy and da, 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 da. You know, like, and it's okay not to be, and it's okay to recognize like the world is fucked up. It is. It really is. The world is an evil. It can be an evil and ugly place. Um, but yeah, like so I think for me it's a powerful piece because I was there. Like these are all things I did over
Absolutely.
and over again, thinking that they would work
Absolutely.
again. And like, nope. So um and I think one of the most powerful things about it is I don't know if you recognize it, but she doesn't leave us with a solution at all.
Nope. Nope.
It's just like I tried to do these things. And I mean, obviously, it's telling that they didn't work because she wouldn't have perhaps made a song about it. But
Maybe.
yeah,
Right. I
but
think
yeah,
we harm ourselves to try to liberate ourselves, you know, frequently. And I think that this song connected with people because I think it's the nature of society to block out our real emotions and our really confront the tough decision and the tough conversation or the tough, visit or the tough whatever to get through to the other side. Um, and yeah, I connected with it because I had to go through a lot in order to get to where I am now. And listening to it in preparation for our discussion really just kind of brought back how far I always say that music decorates time. So it just brought back how far I had come. Not necessarily since 2016, but since a lot further back than that. So it's one of those records that can be turned to not necessarily as a solution or as a map, but it can be viewed as somebody just saying, just continue to seek your truth, continue to figure it out, but you don't have to harm yourself to figure it out. And in actuality, by a lot of times it's not making the tough decision. It's not making the tough decision. It's not sticking out what you need to stick out in order to deal with it. So it definitely affected me. I was really excited to listen to it. And I was really excited to listen to this album when we first talked, because customarily I listen to projects that in the first few episodes of the podcast, I listen to projects that I'm extremely, extremely familiar with already. But even when I go back and I listen to them, I always find something new. And so listening to this is probably up to this point the newest project that we've analyzed and we've discussed. So being able to listen to it through the ears of this is something that happened in the last 5 years. And where is the consciousness of Black people in the last 5 years? And I do think that it's based around this meaning making, this new meaning making, as well as the concept of seeking freedom. Still, that hasn't changed. But I want to thank you for coming today. I think that you are a blessing to the people whom you teach and who you support and who these committees that you sit on or whatever, when you choose to sit on them. I definitely can appreciate your perspective as a woman, but more so, even more so as a scholar.
thank you.
And I just look forward to continuing to try to follow in your footsteps as a graduate of this program, but more so as a person that's trying to find truth.
Okay.
Now, before we take off, we want to make sure everybody likes, share, and subscribe, no matter where you are, be it if you're listening to us on a streaming platform or you're on YouTube. Dr. Carter, do you have any plugs? Do you got anything that you want to plug or anything I can put out there for you?
Sure. They can visit my website. It's thesisbrand.com. So SIS, or actually THESISBRAND.com.
Okay. Perfect. Again, we want to thank our sponsors, Grove Studios, Leon Speakers, Project Plugin, Mind State Marketing, everybody else that's supporting the show. I just couldn't thank you enough for continuing to rock with us. And until next time, this is Rod Wallace. Support the artists and the artisans around you, because if the music stops, everything else does. Thank you.